The leopard had killed an impala minutes earlier. It dragged the carcass to the edge of a waterhole in South Africa's Greater Kruger National Park, a landscape holding one of the largest remaining lion populations on Earth. The cat lowered its head to feed, muscles still tense from the hunt. A hidden speaker, triggered by the animal's movement, began to play a sound. It was not a lion's snarl. It was not a gunshot or the baying of hunting dogs. It was the voice of a woman, speaking calmly in Tsonga, a local language, her words sourced from a radio broadcast. The leopard dropped the fresh kill from its jaws and bolted into the bush without looking back. When researchers later played the sound of a lion pride snarling and growling at the same waterhole, the same species of leopard hesitated. It looked around. It assessed the threat, and only then retreated. The difference in those two responses contains a truth that reshapes your understanding of the natural world. Not just what animals fear, but what they fear most, and why that answer points directly at you. Professor Liana Zanette, a biologist at the University of Western Ontario, spent months reviewing over 15,000 videos from this experiment. Her team had deployed automated camera and speaker systems at 21 waterholes across the park, covering over 240 square kilometers of contiguous savanna. These devices operated 24 hours a day without a single human present. When an animal approached to drink, the system randomly played one of 5 sounds. The first was the conversational snarls and growls of a lion pride, curated by lion expert Craig Packer of the University of Minnesota to represent the intimate, threatening communication of the apex predator. The second was a sound you would never expect to terrify anything, men and women speaking calmly in 4 local languages: Tsonga, Northern Sotho, English, and Afrikaans, sourced from radio and television broadcasts. The third and fourth were sounds associated with human hunting, barking dogs, and gunshots. The fifth was a control, the harmless chatter of local birds. Every sound was played at the exact same volume, 60 decibels, from a distance of about 10 meters. Imagine standing at the edge of that waterhole. You hear a voice, nothing more. What happens next defied everything researchers expected. The data was not subtle. Wild mammals were twice as likely to flee when they heard a human voice compared to a lion's growl. They abandoned the waterholes 40% faster. This was not the expected result. Lions are the largest group hunting land predators on the planet. They kill and inspire fear in everything from elephants to steenbok. They should be the scariest thing out there. But they are not. You are. The results, published in the journal Current Biology, dismantled a fundamental assumption about the natural world. Fear of humans significantly exceeded fear of lions throughout the entire savanna mammal community. 95% of the mammals in the study, including giraffes, leopards, hyenas, zebras, kudu, warthogs, and impala, showed a greater fear response to your voice than to lion vocalizations. This was not a subtle statistical trend. It was a near-universal signal that cut across predator and prey, large and small, solitary and social. The fear of humans was not greater than the fear of lions by a small margin. It was in a category of its own. But there was one exception that proved the rule with brutal precision. The African wild dog, a lean and tireless pack hunter, was the only species that fled more readily from lions than from humans. This makes immediate evolutionary sense. Lions are the primary natural enemy of wild dogs, actively hunting them and raiding their dens. For a wild dog, a lion is not a threat. It is a specialized executioner. For every other creature on the savanna, the human voice is worse. But the data holds an even more unsettling detail, and it involves the one animal you would expect to fear nothing. When researchers played the growls of a lion pride, the elephants did not run. They bunched together, forming a defensive wall of flesh and tusks, herding their young into the center. Then, the matriarch charged the speaker. She smashed it to pieces with her trunk and feet, destroying the source of the threat in a calculated act of aggression. This is the behavior of an animal that knows how to handle a lion. It does not know how to handle you. When the same speaker played a human voice, the elephants turned and ran. There was no defensive formation, no counterattack, no assessment of the threat. The largest land animal on Earth, a creature that can flip a car and snap a tree, fled in silence from the sound of a person talking calmly in Tsonga. Professor Michael Clinchy, a co-author of the study from the University of Western Ontario, noted that this was the most dramatic behavioral contrast in the entire experiment. The elephant chose to fight the lion, but it chose to flee from you. That contrast alone is enough to rewrite what you think you know about your place in the natural world. But the fear is not confined to the African savanna. It is a planetary architecture, a global landscape of terror with a single architect. In 2017, ecologist Justin Suraci, now at Conservation Science Partners, proved that this terror follows your voice across continents. He conducted a parallel experiment in the Santa Cruz Mountains of California, locating fresh kills made by mountain lions, also known as cougars. His team placed hidden speakers near the carcasses and waited for the big cats to return to feed. When the cougars heard the sound of frogs croaking, a harmless control, they settled in to eat without concern. Nothing in their behavior suggested alarm. When the speakers played the sound of human conversation, a podcast of a man calmly discussing a court case, the reaction was immediate and absolute. The cougars almost invariably fled from their kills. Some never returned. Those that did took far longer to come back, and over a 24-hour period, they spent half as much time feeding as they would have under normal circumstances. This was not a startled response to a novel sound. The cougars were abandoning a hard-won, life-sustaining meal at the mere suggestion that someone like you was nearby. The study, published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B, demonstrated something extraordinary. The terror your species inspires was powerful enough to starve a top carnivore. The pattern repeats across continents and ecosystems. In the United Kingdom, European badgers react far more fearfully to audio recordings of humans than to the sounds of wolves or bears, their historical natural enemies. In Australia, kangaroos and wallabies bound away from human voices more readily than from the growls of dingoes. White-tailed deer in North America and wild boar in Europe tell the same story. The fear of you is the most universal and potent force in the animal kingdom. In 2018, Kaitlyn Gaynor, then a doctoral candidate at the University of California, Berkeley, published a study in the journal Science that revealed just how deep this terror runs. Her team analyzed data from 62 mammal species across 6 continents. What they found was a global behavioral revolution happening in silence. Mammals everywhere are retreating into the night to avoid you. On average, animals increase their nighttime activity by a factor of 1.36 in response to human presence. A species that once split its time evenly between day and night now spends nearly 70% of its active hours in darkness when humans are nearby. This shift was not limited to hunted species. It occurred in response to hiking, farming, road traffic, and simple proximity to human settlements. The pattern held across body sizes, across habitats, across continents. Gaynor noted that the last time mammals were forced into the night on this scale was 66 million years ago, when they hid from dinosaurs. Your species has recreated that pressure. You have pushed the animal kingdom back into the dark, not with teeth or claws, but with your mere presence on the landscape. This global reign of terror is not accidental. It is a direct consequence of a lethal capacity that is unmatched in the history of life on Earth. A landmark global survey published in 2015 in the journal Science, led by Darimont at the University of Victoria, quantified this for the first time. His team compiled over 2,000 estimates of annual exploitation rates from predator-prey systems around the world, both marine and terrestrial. The numbers were staggering. In the oceans, your species exploits adult fish populations at rates up to 14 times higher than any marine predator. On land, you kill large carnivores, the bears, wolves, and lions at the top of the food chain, at 9 times the rate those predators kill each other. Not juveniles, not the sick, not the old. Healthy, breeding-age adults, the ones hardest to replace. Darimont called this drawing down the reproductive capital of entire populations. Every other predator on Earth takes the interest, the surplus, the expendable. Your species takes the principal, the breeding stock that holds the population together. No other predator on Earth operates this way. Lions, wolves, and sharks overwhelmingly target the vulnerable. Your species targets the strongest, the most productive, the hardest to replace. From the perspective of a zebra standing at that waterhole, a lion is a manageable risk. It hunts in predictable patterns, at predictable times, in predictable places. A lion must chase its prey down with its own body, and it can be seen, heard, smelled, and outrun. You are none of those things. You kill from a distance, kill in the dark. kill with tools that make size irrelevant. Your species kills at rates no natural predator can match, and does so without regard for the biological rules that every other predator follows. The animals have done the math, not consciously, but through hundreds of thousands of years of natural selection. The ones that feared your voice survived. The ones that did not disappeared from the gene pool. The fear is not a fleeting moment of panic. It is a tax levied on the very act of survival. Every time a zebra bolts from a waterhole at the sound of a human voice, it burns calories it cannot spare. Every minute a nursing giraffe spends scanning the tree line for the source of a distant conversation is a minute it is not producing milk for its calf. Professor Zanette and her team demonstrated in previous research that this kind of chronic stress can suppress reproductive success. It reduces population growth rates even when no animal is harmed. Ecologists call this the landscape of fear, and your voice is its most powerful architect. In 2011, Zanette published a study in the journal Science that isolated the effects of fear with surgical precision. Working with a population of song sparrows in British Columbia, her team physically protected every nest from predators using electric fencing and netting. No bird was killed, no egg was taken. Then they played the sounds of predators through hidden speakers near some nests, while playing harmless sounds near others. The birds that heard predator calls produced 40% fewer offspring over the course of a breeding season. Not because any were eaten, but because the fear changed their behavior so profoundly that they laid fewer eggs, spent less time incubating, and made fewer feeding trips to their young. 40% fewer offspring. From sound alone. No predator ever touched a single bird. Now apply that finding to the savanna, where the sound of your voice triggers a fear response more intense than any natural predator. The reproductive cost is not theoretical. It is measurable, and it is compounding across every generation that hears you coming. The cost is not paid only by the animals that flee. It cascades. In the Greater Kruger ecosystem, the waterholes where the experiment took place are not drinking fountains. They are the gravitational centers of life. When the persistent, invisible threat of your presence drives a dominant grazer like a zebra or a kudu away, that animal does not find another place to drink. It abandons the most productive grazing lawns, the areas it has kept cropped short and nutritious through its own feeding. Those lawns then grow tall and coarse. They become less suitable for the smaller, more selective grazers that depend on the zebra's landscaping. The entire architecture of the herbivore community begins to shift, not because anyone was killed, but because everyone was afraid. This is the ecology of fear made visible. It is not a metaphor. It is a measurable physical force that reshapes the land, and you do not have to fire a single shot to set it in motion. Ecologists have observed this same phenomenon playing out in North America. The fear of cougars, or rather the fear of the human superpredator that now terrifies the cougars, has rewritten the browsing habits of deer. In the Santa Cruz Mountains, Justine Smith's work showed that deer began to cluster closer to human homes and hiking trails. They sought refuge from cougars by moving toward you. They treated the sound of a podcast or a passing car as a shield against the teeth and claws of a big cat. The prey of a predator that fears you has learned to hide behind you. Your presence has become the most powerful force field in the ecosystem. This brings you to the most unsettling puzzle in the entire study. The sound of a calm human voice was more terrifying to wildlife than the sound of gunfire. A gunshot is an unambiguous, thunderous signal of lethal danger, a sound engineered by physics to carry for miles. A human voice is a complex stream of frequencies, a social signal, a sound you use to read your child a bedtime story. The animals of the savanna have learned to decode its specific acoustic signature and rank it as a higher threat than the report of a rifle. The researchers believe the answer lies in the reliability of the signal. A gunshot is a single, transient event. It is loud, but it does not necessarily mean a human is close. A conversation, however, is a continuous, localized broadcast. It is an acoustic beacon that says a human is here, right now, within 10 meters of this waterhole. The voice is a more precise and therefore more trustworthy indicator of immediate, lethal proximity. The animals did not just learn to fear humans. They learned to identify the exact sound that means a human is standing close enough to end their life. And that sound is the one you make every single day without thinking about it. This learning is not the product of a single lifetime. It is a cultural inheritance passed down through generations of animals. A matriarch elephant who witnessed her family member shot by a poacher decades ago teaches her calves one lesson through her own fear and flight. The sound of a human voice means death. That lesson is then taught to their calves, and to theirs, creating a lineage of terror that persists long after the guns have fallen silent in a protected park. The voice itself becomes the weapon. This is why the fear is so pervasive and so resistant to habituation. The animals are not responding to a sound. They are responding to a history of your species, written in blood over hundreds of thousands of years. And here is what makes the finding most consequential for the future of conservation. The Greater Kruger National Park is a protected area. Hunting has been banned within its boundaries for decades. The waterholes where Zanette's speakers played are surrounded by fences and patrols and laws designed to keep animals safe. But the animals are still terrified of your voice. The protection has not erased the fear. The matriarchs still remember. The calves still learn. The neural architecture that encoded the threat of humans over hundreds of thousands of years does not reset because a government signed a piece of paper. This means that the mere presence of tourists, of researchers, of park rangers speaking into radios may be imposing a measurable cost on the wildlife they are trying to protect. The fence keeps the poacher out, but it does not keep the fear out. The human voice is the one sound that has consistently preceded the most lethal form of predation the planet has ever seen. Your species did not earn this fear through strength, or speed, or size. You earned it through an unbroken record of killing that spans every continent, every ecosystem, every era of recorded and unrecorded time. This is the mirror that the study holds up to you. The same ancient neural architecture that makes your heart rate spike when you hear an unexpected footstep in a dark alley is the architecture operating inside the zebra, the giraffe, and the elephant. But the signal that triggers their alarm is not a shadow or a sudden movement. It is the specific acoustic signature of your species. It is the sound of a conversation. Professor Liana Zanette and her colleagues did not set out to depress the world. They set out to measure a force that ecologists had long suspected but never quantified on this scale, the force of fear itself. What they found reshaped an entire field of ecology. The human voice is not another sound in the environment. It is a signal that has been paired with death so consistently, for so long, that it now operates as a universal trigger for the most profound survival response an animal can execute. You are not a participant in the natural world. You are the force that reshapes it by your presence alone. The whisper that changed the world was yours.